Okay, so we're also live on YouTube now.
I see that.
Yay! Well, we'll just do one more thing. Okay, so we're also live on YouTube now.
I see that.
Yay! There you go. It's like I gotta turn off every single thing that can make a noise because it's so.
Yeah, you got to put the phone on complete silence.
Yeah, this was my.
Or do not disturb.
It's the computer, so I'm gonna have to log out of messaging. Okay. Okay, let me make this recording live. Okay, we'll get started in just 1 second. All right, back. Just make sure I've got everything started. I'm kind of my own tech crew here for just a moment.
I know the feeling.
All right, so I have us live on YouTube and also on Zoom. I want to welcome all of our attendees tonight. It's going to be a great conversation. I'm Bella Mackenzie, registered nurse, also getting my certification as a family nurse practitioner. I am super excited to host this discussion. I was the tech crew for the last one that we did, which was about social justice and racism in the church. And this one should be interesting because I didn't want to leave out our kids in this discussion. I'm going to go around because I have a fantastic group of ladies. All of us have diverse backgrounds, which is the most beautiful thing. You would be surprised where we all have origins, and yet we can come together on this topic because I think we've all had a fairly similar experience to some degree. And what we want to do is host a very loving but honest discussion on racism, social justice, and also our church. I want to say, I'm sorry, not racism, just social justice. We're talking about COVID-19 as well. And that's important because I'm sure there are some of you that do want to hear about COVID-19 as well. Racism, social justice, and our church was our last one. And this one is social justice, COVID-19, and our kids. So what I'm going to do is first lay out a couple rules for you guys. Initially, when we got started, we had a lovely person who was using profanity. Unfortunately, we had to remove them from the meeting, and I'm sure they had something valuable to add to the discussion. But I want to ask that all of us keep this discussion as clean as possible, as nice as possible. We are aware that there are tensions in the United States amongst races. We are aware that all lives truly do matter. As Christians, I think all of us can agree that God created every single person and everyone is special in the sight of God. So this is not ever to negate the beauty of diversity. This is to celebrate it. The other thing that this is not to do is to stimulate more hate. But I think that what we want to do is edify a community that wants to be aware, who are interested in this topic. We want to be able to provide an opinion that's not based on political party. So it's none of that. This isn't about if you're right versus left, liberal versus conservative, it's not. That has no place in this discussion. Maybe that's another live. But this one is just going to be based on our experiences as professionals, parents, as just citizens of the United States. And we hope that this is an edifying discussion for you. Now, what you do have available to you at this time is you can ask questions in our Q&A. The Q&A section is for you. So ask your questions and I will look through them intermittently here and we'll pose them to the right person, especially if your question is directed to someone. Let me know if you have a question for one of our professionals here. But if you just have a general question or something to say, I may mention it during this time, as long as it's respectful. You can have a different opinion. So we're not controlling your minds here. You are free Americans, obviously, but we want everybody to be just gentle with their words and to think about them before they say them, okay? So before we get started, let's have our panelists, as your picture was on the flyer, introduce yourself, tell us just a little snippet about yourself, and then we can move on, okay?
Okay, so I think I'm getting started then, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Vimbo. It rhymes with limbo. It starts with a V though. I was born in Zimbabwe, but I grew up in the United States. So I have been an educator for quite a few years. Most recently, I've been a principal for the last 3 years of my career as an educator. So this last 10 weeks of school this spring was the first time I was a virtual principal ever. And so yeah, that's what I do with my life. also, besides being an educator as my profession, I also have a passion for educational equality. So I started my own nonprofit about 5 years ago, and every couple of years I do go back to Zimbabwe. I've adopted a high school there, and basically I just fundraise and beg people for money and on the other side of the world, and then take it over there. And we've been able to do a well at this high school and get running water and do some education for girls. And so anyway, I'm very passionate about educational equality, especially for young girls or vulnerable groups that are unable to access education. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So cool. I love that.
Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining us. My name is Kishma Trotman. I am a licensed master's level social worker. I primarily work as a therapist for children that are in foster care, a therapeutic foster care program. And I also do some work as a therapist in an outpatient mental health clinic. And then I have another job where I'm a clinical supervisor for counselors who are providing psychiatric rehabilitation services to children and adults. My passion is to work primarily with youth, not really children. The younger ones are a little bit challenging for me, but youth and old youth that are like aging out of foster care or what we call transitional age youth and their families, because this is a population that if you do the research, has significant obstacles ahead of them: mental health, poverty, lack of support, familiar and social. So as a social worker, it's just my desire to help really anyone who's in need. And I'm excited that God has given me a talent that I can share, because I didn't know what my talent was until like a couple of months ago. And I've been a social worker for a while. So yeah, that's me.
My name is Ruthann Patricia McKenzie. I go by Pat, and I am a proud Jamaican woman. I have been here all of my life in America. I am an entrepreneur. I am also an IT guru, semi-IT guru. I am an author of 2 books, co-author of another one. I have done a lot of things, but I think that the thing that I'm most proud of is being a mom to my little AJ. I am a mom of a 9-year-old, and having her is what really changed the trajectory of my life personally. Making sure that she knows how much she's loved and knowing how much that she's cared for is something that's very important to me. And also helping other children around her age group, and even up to teenage years, is really important to me too. I do have a primary focus towards really mentoring and caring about young girls, but also our boys need that love and attention too. So that's just a little bit about me.
Fantastic. How do you guys feel about the year so far? Look, everybody's got a facial feature. Look, think about that. I mean, Kishma, you're in.
It's a year of surprises, right? So a lot of people, 2020, the year of vision, right? A lot of people are about the vision and I'm going to reach my goals. And, in society, everybody wants to own their own business and do all these things. And COVID kind of just is like, boop. And that, that changed so much for people. I think that some people, like in my own personal life, I haven't been impacted by COVID in a negative standpoint. It actually has been a little bit more positive in terms of like my work, my ability to work, my ability to being introduced into participating in discussions like this. But I have girlfriends who are planning weddings and are distraught that their weddings, were not able to go through, and kids who deal with significant like depression and emotional and social issues, who are like, Ms. Kishma, they're struggling at home, right? You would think like, oh, they're out from school. They are struggling really bad. And some parents are really not in tune with their children right now and know that that's happening. So it's a year of surprises, but I think it's also a time for us to grow, right? Tragedy and trouble to me is not made to destroy us, but to strengthen us. Like the greatest tragedy that ever happened was Jesus dying on the cross. But look what that gave us, salvation and eternal life, right? So that's my perspective, that even though we're going through a lot of things individually, as a country, as a, a community, there's potential to jump through this and to really do some great things. So,
That's right.
I would,
Oh, go on. Yeah, sure.
I would say that this year, year of surprises is one way to put it, but it's been a massive roller coaster, to say the absolute least. I have personally been impacted by COVID. I've been impacted in so many different ways. And I mean, both negative and positive in a way, which is odd to say, but out of all of this, one thing that I'm trying to take away from it as best as possible is to keep pushing, to just keep going day by day and make it a focus of, okay, you know what, if God brought me through that day, he's going to bring me through the next one and the next one, and just keeping focus on one day at a time. I know that this year has been really difficult too for my daughter, especially since she hasn't had that interaction with other children her age for the last 4 months or so. That's been really tough. So just trying to work through that with her too has been a struggle, but even still, we've gotten a whole lot more time to spend together, which I haven't had this much time with her working from home since she was a newborn. So for that, I'm extremely grateful and thankful.
Well, I will just echo what everyone has said as far as surprises and being good and bad. I think I remember back to the exact day during our spring break when, the announcement was made nationwide that things were going to start shutting down and schools were probably going to have to go online. And I remembered I gave myself a couple of days to like mourn internally, because I'm a human. I spiraled with my thoughts. I called my sister, she's a nurse. I'm like, I'm so scared, I'm so sad. And then I pulled it together and I met with my teachers and I was like, okay, guys, what are we going to do to make sure our kids can keep learning through this thing? Oh, wait.
Don't go into all that yet.
Oh, okay. I will reel it in. So I just have to talk about me personally. I just have to talk about how it's impacted me personally. Okay, let me talk about me as a person. It's so hard because so much of my life is my job, but I will say this without getting into my life or without my life work. I think one thing that I have settled into in the last few weeks is realizing that every time I'm very much so in 2020, I've been like, okay, it's going to be better next month. Something else has hit. Something else has hit. So what I've just realized is no matter what the stressor is, even now where we are in the year, no matter what the stressor is, I have to determine within myself how I'm going to ground myself. What am I going to do? Like, regardless of anything, am I going to make sure I get a walk in a day? Am I going to make sure I have my prayer time with God? Because otherwise, every time I'm like, oh, things are getting better, there's something else going on social media, and there's something else in the news, and there's another reason for me to unravel emotionally. So that's me without getting into my work yet, because I'm so excited.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, she's giving away some gems, and we're gonna hold that back for just a little bit. You guys are gonna get to her work. But what I want to say is thank you for everyone who joined in the time that we were letting you get to know us a little bit. Just want to let you know that you can use the QA section. We did have to close the chat, but the QA section is open for any questions you have throughout. If you have a question that's directly for one of our panelists, please feel free to do so, to put their name and then your question to them, and I will try to weave it into here because we want this to be interactive. So while we cannot see you, we can see your names, and we can also see your questions, and I will kind of facilitate through to be able to answer those questions, okay? Well, as best as we can. So now I'm going to get into the general question portion. This portion of the discussion is just kind of general to any of you guys here that are on the panel. And then I will get into specific questions based on your area of specialty. And by the way, everybody, our panelists have no clue what these questions are. I wanted to keep it as authentic as possible so that you could get professional opinions that were not practiced. So I kind of made it a surprise just to kind of make sure that the conversation was fair, okay? So the first question, ladies. You've witnessed and in many ways experienced the unrest in this country right now. As an individual and as a leader in our community, in various capacities, how are you personally dealing with the unrest in the whole scheme of things? So this is not just COVID, this is in general. How are you internally processing it? How are you emotionally dealing with it?
So back when Mr. Floyd was murdered, I don't even have cable. So I didn't know what happened. And one day somebody said, oh, auntie, such and such. And I said, what are you talking about? And then I looked it up and I said, oh, wow. And then I was at work and I work with social workers, right? People who are trained to understand and train, all these good things. And in a chat that my colleagues and I, who are therapists, were having, there were some comments that really stirred me up. And I was actually in a Zoom supervision with my supervisor, who is an African-American woman. And she kept saying, what are you reading? Like, what's going on? And I said, these people, and I'm going off. And I had to address the comments that were made in the chat. It was particular about, our kids. Like, I work on a residential program as well for kids who have significant mental health issues and who are in the foster care and the child welfare system. And they wanted our kids to go and protest and things. And I'm saying, have we thought about who our kids are? Like, our kids, cannot emotionally regulate. Do they know the difference between a protest and a riot? So I said to my colleagues who they are predominantly Caucasian, I said, I feel that you're projecting your individual desire to be an advocate on our children, right? Many who are Black and brown children. And a lot of anger came up. I mean, I was furious. So the things that are happening have made me angry. It has made me question, ask more questions to God. One of the questions I asked, and I was like, Lord, are you white and only care, is white, are you white? I had that question with the Lord, because I'm having a difficult time with my brothers and sisters who are Caucasian. And I'm wondering if you were white, does that change the way I feel? I mean, I just had that serious conversation with God, something that I never thought that I would have, I don't think I'm the super big advocate as in organization, but I do support advocacy. I've always been kind of a fighter, so my fighting spirit came out and the Christian spirit. And I said, Lord, I'm trying to be a Martin, but right now I'm feeling all like Malcolm. That's really what was coming out, So I'm asking God, how do I kind of balance that? Right? Martin Luther King had some great points, and so did Malcolm X. So how can I merge those two together the way that God wants to use me to impact my immediate community and the community beyond?
Yeah, I want to just add to her, because you used a word right now, anger. I think from even when, I don't know if you guys remember, a few months back, it was very popular on social media for people to go on a walk for Ahmaud Arbery. It was a specific date, everybody was posting. And then within a couple weeks, this thing happened with George Floyd. And I just I wanted to flip tables. I think for me, if I can pinpoint where the biggest point of my anger was when I talked to actually, I don't even want to just make this specific to my non-Black friends, because at some point we'll go into the differences between different kinds of Black people, because we're not all the same. A Zimbabwean is not the same as a Nigerian, is not the same as an African American. And even within the Black community, I was sometimes frustrated talking to other Black people who were like, that's not my problem, because I'm not African American, I'm Caribbean, or I'm not African American, I'm African. I'm like, listen, when I go into Walmart, when I go into Target, I am a Black woman. So whatever someone thinks about Black people impacts me in the way they treat me. But I remember just being so frustrated, particularly talking to white Christians. And I felt this rage because I do work in spaces in my context where I'm working with leadership, people who have the power to change policies, a policy that may not be overtly racist, but it can impact people's experiences in worship and education and different things like that. And talking to these people and like having myself really realize that they were more bothered by a Target being vandalized than years of oppression, or than like literally seeing a man being killed on a video, which I never watched any of the videos. I can't bring myself to do it to myself. I stopped doing that years ago because it triggers so much rage. But I know personally what I had to do is talk to my friends, calm myself down, seek wisdom, and then focus on what is it I can do in my personal life to impact change. So I post all the time. Guys, it's almost end of July and I'm still posting Black Lives Matter on my social media, even though it's not as popular, it's not as cool, it's not the Blackout Tuesday. I'm still posting. If people engage in conversations with me, I do try to talk about my own personal experience and say, my experience isn't every Black person's experience, but this is what racism has been for me. This is how I've experienced bias. And then in my position, which we're not getting into yet, but in my position as an administrator, I think all of us have to look at how do our policies disproportionately impact people who are low socioeconomic from that lower bracket, and how that overlaps with race, because oftentimes it does. Oftentimes the policies we're making do disproportionately affect our Black students, our Black and brown kids. So how can we make sure we're not being racist on accident? I think that's what's helped me move away from anger into action. So that's how I personally reacted to everything that's going on.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did you have a reflection on this point?
I did. For me, when I found out about Ahmaud Arbery, it's like all over again. It's like, not again. And not during this time too. It's like, come on. And then it's like, then it's a snowball. Then you hear about Breonna Taylor, and then it's George Floyd, and then it's Elijah McClain, and it's just name after name after name. And I, like Vimbo was stating, within the Black community, because we're so different, being Caribbean versus, actually being from the continent of Africa versus African American, I've taken the time, instead of just sitting and being like, oh, this is really sad, oh no, oh, that's terrible, actually deciding to really understand the history and where systematic racism is rooted in. Because at the end of the day, I realized that the way that, and I don't think that my parents intentionally meant to do it in any sort of a harmful way, but they kind of taught us we're different, we're a little better than others, and but that doesn't teach you any history. That doesn't teach you anything in the long run, and it just kind of perpetuates the cycle going forward, and it doesn't really give you any compassion. So for me, I've been trying to really, instead of just work off of bare emotion of this is really sad, and then hearing another name and hearing another name, actually trying to understand history, understand my actual history from Jamaica too, starting from slavery on even before then, and understanding American slavery and the laws even now that still disproportionately affect. And then from there, trying to teach. And I try my hardest not to go off in comment sections, which nowadays I have a lot more time and the little educator in me wants to go off and make paragraphs, but for those who are somewhat immediately connected to me, some of my white counterparts and such, I've taken time to, kind of give them a better education based off the research that I've done, so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming, but it seems like something can actually be done. And also, thankfully, for the most part, a lot of the people that I know have been forward speaking out in regards to this, and that makes me, proud of the people that I keep around. So,
no problem. This is good discussion. So I was for all of you guys, and don't feel like you have to answer every question. This is just general talk. So don't feel like you have to have an answer for everything. But
we've all got a lot on our hearts, so we might.
If you do, that's fine. But if it's just like, that's not my type of question. Okay. So there was someone that posted the following on Facebook, and I'm sure we've all had our Facebook, like Ms. Pat was saying, had their Facebook, Instagram interactions. We've even had one on here on Zoom that, initially started out and had some comments for us. They're no longer with us, but, if you did come back under a different name, if your spirit's different, you're welcome. So, but this was the comment that was placed on Facebook. It said, Black Lives Matter organization versus Black Lives Matter fact. There's a difference. I'm for the latter. I don't have to subscribe to everything in a movement to support a just cause. I'm aware that I have the freedom to choose to accept certain concepts in a movement and reject others. The Black Lives Matter organization has some ideals that I find hard to swallow. However, this doesn't mean I can't support the fact that Black Lives Matter and fight to see justice in that sense. It's so easy for us to automatically take in all ideologies provided by an organization without thinking critically just because it supports a just cause we like. That's why I separate the fact that Black Lives Matter from the Black Lives Matter organization. We don't have to box ourselves in. We have the opportunity to exercise critical thinking. Let's use it. Now, this is from a Latinx individual who would be white passing. So this is his perspective. Is he's been putting up a lot of stuff about Black Lives Matter, and he's been getting attacked by, making that statement, which is, it goes beyond an organization. It's just an affirmation. And again, I said at the beginning, I just want to make this statement before I let the panelists engage with this. Again, this is not to negate that all lives matter. And this is, I think, the point that I think that some people are having a difficult time accepting is absolutely all lives matter. This is the truth. And this is something that if we all don't feel that way, we need to check our own hearts. I've never, ever, ever thought in the back of my head different. I'm sure the rest of us also feel the same, especially as Christians, all lives do matter. And that is a period after that. There's no but after that, because but negates the first statement. What we are simply saying is at this present time in history, we have to reaffirm a group that includes us, all four of us right here, who have faced a certain amount of pressure. Being Black is now politicized. If we talk about it, we're in a political party, and that's not exactly true. So I want you guys to understand more than anything else that when we talk about these topics, because we're going to get into some specific topics as it pertains to social justice, racism type things, that there is no intention to negate the fact that everyone's life matter. We just hope that we can understand the beauty and diversity, and we'd celebrate any group that is facing oppression and say that everybody matters in that group. So these ladies wouldn't be here if they didn't feel that way. So please understand that. But outside of the politicized, sensationalized stuff going on, what does the phrase Black Lives Matter mean to you in a very succinct way? What does it mean?
Black Lives Matter. There he goes.
Drop the mic. She covered it. She covered it.
There it is.
Yeah, you know, I think like the person who wrote the I actually read that post on Facebook, and I've learned some different stuff about the Black Lives Matter movement that makes me question certain things, but just the general Black Lives Matter, like you said, all lives do matter. What we're doing is focusing on a group of people that I just happen to belong to that are struggling and that are really having some very horrible things, you know, done to them. So like as a social worker, right? I mentioned earlier that I particularly like to work with youth, especially transitional age youth. They are a group of people that need help, right? That are going through stuff. So I think if we look at it that way, instead of people getting offended about saying Black Lives Matter, we're just saying that there is a group of people who happen to be Black, right? Who have been oppressed for years, who are being murdered, you know, whose families are being torn apart. And this has been happening for years. So when people, you know, put the all lives matter, I personally think that it's offensive to because I think people are saying that the other lives don't matter. I don't really think they're saying it because they really believe that all lives matter, right? So I think that we get into this and we don't want to offend others, so we say you know all lives do matter. It is true, but we're just trying to focus on a particular group of people who are really struggling and who really need all hands on deck, right? So within the Black community, there needs to be some changes. There needs to be some education, some organization. But there's nothing wrong with people who are not directly in the Black community with helping, right? So if all lives matter, we would just jump on board and help that particular group that's struggling right then and there, instead of saying, oh, it's just all lives matter. You know, people are getting offended because a group of people are trying to, you know, stand up and bring change in their immediate community. So I think, you know, Black lives do matter. You know, all lives do matter, right? I mean, that's a fact. But I think a lot of people, you know, when they're saying it, it's not a genuine all lives matter. It's more because they're offended. You know, they're scared. You know, I honestly don't think it's because all lives matter. You know, so I'm proud to say that Black lives do matter. I do not agree maybe with everything like that gentleman said, that the Black Lives Matter movement has maybe has like in their backing, but that we can go into that maybe at another, you know, presentation. But I think lifting up a group of people who need help is very important. When children are abused, let's say, right? Everybody is sensitive to that because they're children. We do not say, well, you know, the children in this, you know, they're children, right? And we're fighting for them. And I wish that a lot of people would just say, like, you know what, this is another human being. Yes, they are Black. This is another human being. Let's fight for them just as hard, you know?
Wow, that's so true. I totally agree with it. I wish we could separate the two. And I think that just education is continually needed, as with some of the stereotypes. Um, for instance, everybody has a news consumption source. I grew up with Fox News, so I'm always on Fox News, and my husband thinks I'm weird. And so we have like this divide that I think Pat can also attest to. We have this divide because of our varying perspectives on things. But I have seen the comment section, and it just is so disheartening because it's just like, guys, you're totally misunderstanding, stereotyping. There's a whole lot going on here that's more internal, like I stated, than even external. It's not anything that you've really heard. There are some people who, you know, can be racist in any community. I don't disagree with that. But I think that at this present time, we've presented a very balanced perspective. I've only heard pretty balanced statements being made from the camp of people who've said Black Lives Matter. And from there, I just take it as, you know what, they're advocating for a group of people as they should. And this is the time when they should be doing that. This is a perfect time to do that. So into the next question, let's talk about Generation Z. Gen Z is diverse. Gen Z, in terms of ethnicity and culture, they're just a big melting pot. How do you believe they are relating to the Black, brown, white divide? And specifically, I'm thinking also because most of them are of mixed race, mixed ethnicity. They're saying that that is the most diverse group ever. How do you think that they are relating to this, and how do we help them through this discussion? Because they're seeing us adults go at this, and most of them are of a diverse heritage or a diverse culture. So specifically, I think that, you know, Vimbo and Kishma, you might have a lot to say on this. Pat, I know you as a multiracial individual, you may have some feelings towards this. How are these kids feeling, and what can we do for them?
As far as what I see, because I spend a lot of time on social media, and the young adults that I know that are in Gen Z, the teens, the little kids, I don't know what age it cuts off at, but one thing is I've noticed, for the most part, I'm really proud of that group. I know that usually the generation above always like, you know, oh, the younger crowd, oh, they're terrible. But seeing how they've been handling this through TikTok videos and posts on Instagram and Twitter, I'm just like, yes, you guys get it. To see them have huge discussions with their parents that are Gen Xers, because they're not that much older, and their parents screaming at them because, like, no, you're not getting it. You know, you're not supposed to like X, Y, and Z, and them defending the position of Black Lives Matter. It's like, you see, it's really not that hard, guys. You guys get it. I was really scared about the Tide Pod thing at first, but it's like, okay, you guys are kind of getting it.
Yeah.
That was a scary time for educators.
Yeah.
Scary time. But I just piggybacking off of what she's saying, I do think Gen Z gives me hope. They are a resilient generation. They are out in the streets, like literally, not just metaphorically, or like, oh, they're in the, no, like they are leading the movement. They are protesting. They are using, like she said, their social media, using TikTok to move forward the movement. I think what's amazing is that even though social media at sometimes can be very toxic, and it can feel like it's very hard to have an authentic conversation, like in a Facebook comment section or on a YouTube comment section or on Twitter, seems like everyone's just, you know, at each other. I do think there is something about this Gen Z that's like, wait a second, like, even if these conversations are hard, we're going to have them. Like, even if it's uncomfortable for me to call out my great aunt, or even if my dad is the president or is the pastor, or like Gen Z is the generation who's like, I don't care. We're out here. This is an issue. Let's address it. So if anything, I feel hopeful when I see the kids that fill up our classrooms, or just this generation that's coming up, because they're the ones who say, you've taught us about the Holocaust. You've taught us about the Rwandan genocide. You've taught us about things that happen, about inequality. You've taught us about the civil rights movement. Why are you, our parents or our educators, still allowing this to happen in 2020? They're calling us to task. So it's not enough for us to just teach them a history lesson. They're like, wait a second. I turn on my news and this is still happening. Why are you, a grown-up, still letting this happen? So they're like, they're holding us to task. It's uncomfortable, but they're holding us to task.
It's like they're self-advocates, right? So one of the things, like, you know, you try to teach a client sometimes in, you know, therapy, depending on their circumstances, like advocating for themselves, right? Letting their voice be heard. So I think this generation, they're trying to let their voice be heard. I think the best thing that we could do as, you know, a little bit older folks, and even older folks, is to provide that support, right? So, you know, going to scripture, when God talks about, like, in the multitude of counselors, right? So I think we take their passion, their ideas, their drive, right? and we give them a little counsel. Not that we take over and tell them what to do, but we provide them with the support and the counsel. That is what a lot of people individually are lacking, right? When I talk to my clients, lacking that support, that I want to do, you know, this, and I want to go here, and I have this dream, and they're lacking that support to actually actualize that dream. Not everybody has a great Christ-centered relationship when they're leaning on God to help them. You know, a lot of people may not even have any kind of relationship with God, right? So we can't just kind of like leave it off to that. So just being like a support, letting their voices be heard. I don't agree with everything that Gen Z they believe in, right? But having those conversations with them, giving us ourselves the opportunity, and it's hard. There are times when I can sit there and I have to say, Lord, I don't have to agree, but I just have to listen because I think I'm right, Lord. I know I'm right, but right. I think, and we've talked about this in like church, a lot of introspection. We really need to work on our individual kind of path and ideas and thoughts so that we can come to the table with others who are either like-minded or not like-minded and share comfortably and work together. But that is not going to happen if our individual selves are not together, right? If we kind of like don't really know how we feel, or we don't know how to communicate how we feel. A lot of my clients, the communication is horrible. It's horrible. And then I saw a post the other day that says like, I'm learning that communication is not the key, it's comprehension. And I was like, ooh, that is so, because I have sat in like family sessions or a session with like a psychiatrist and the client and the mother, and it's like going back and forth. When we focus so much on communication skills, I try to keep my kids communication skills all the time, but also teaching comprehension. So I think it's just like, we have a lot of work to do, but let's not look at it so much. It is a lot, but there's like little things that we can do individually first, right? Everybody wants to jump in, right? We always want to do the work, but we have to stop, kind of reflect what's going on in my life, where are these feelings coming from, why are they coming, what can I do, and you know, counsel with other people, and then we can come together and then go forward. So I think that is, you know, something we have to support them. And it's okay to disagree. It's okay to say like, you know, Gen Z, I don't really agree with this, you know, particular movement that you're involved in. Here are the reasons why. Let's have a conversation. And they're not easy. Do not think that every time you have a conversation, there's going to be a resolution. That is just not realistic, right? It's just starting. We have to stop looking for these immediate like resolutions, and I'm gonna talk and my husband or my girlfriend or my friend is gonna accept it because I'm gonna communicate well and I'm gonna write down my points. That person may be like, yeah, I don't agree yet. You know what I mean? So being okay with that. It's all a process. And I think we have to understand it's a process.
I like what you said though. Comprehension. Woo, that's a word for all of us, honestly.
When I saw that the other day, I said, it's something just, I'm like, that is so true. We are so, you know, social media, you know, we have all these different, we are like information heavy. But there's so much information out there, some factual and some a little shaky and some that's absolutely not true, right? But we're not, and we're like, we have to communicate. Everybody's always about communication, but it's like, oh wait, are we comprehending what my friend, my partner, my mom is saying? Or we so focused on, we sat down and we talked and I appropriately expressed how I felt. Well, did they get it? You know? So I think that's really important.
I want us to kind of take a look. We got a couple questions that came in, and I'm sorry if you were intending for it to be directed to one or another person. Some of the questions I'm going to save for just a little bit, but I've got two that have come in, and so if one person will just take this one question and answer it briefly. We'll start with Principal Vimbo here.
Why not? Here you are.
Based on our passive approach to issues like these, are we letting Generation Z down?
I think I'm going to try not to throw out too many cliche statements because I'm thinking on the fly, I'm processing. I think when you know better, you do better, right? And we're all learning. We're learning right alongside Gen Z. I have my own experience. I have my own idea of what is possible to change when it comes to racism and discrimination. I, in my brain, have my own ceiling. And I think what's beautiful about this younger generation is they don't really have a ceiling. They're like, if this is wrong, it should be taken down. And we shouldn't have to wait 100 years. We shouldn't have to wait for legislation to pass over 10 years, because they're the generation who's seen things change overnight. YouTube and MySpace and Facebook and Instagram and all of these things that revolutionized their world overnight, whereas generations before did take 10 years for something to become a thing. Or, even after the civil rights movement, there are things that did not change overnight. I think it took days. If someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I read somewhere, I hate quoting things that I don't have sources for, but I know that it wasn't right when Martin Luther King died that Voting Rights Act was passed. It took protests and protests and protests until the people in DC were like, hey, you know what? Yeah, he died. Yeah, they've been marching for this for a while. Yeah, there have been boycotts, but maybe now it's the time. Whereas this generation is like, we can get people fired overnight if they say something racially insensitive. So we're learning, my generation, I'm a millennial, we're learning alongside Gen Z that we need to stop limiting the pace of change. It is a little scary because I don't think all change is good change. I do think sometimes there are things that help things work, but when it comes to racism or bias or things that are holding people back for something that they have, like, I didn't wake up and decide to be a Black woman, right? Those are things that I think we need to assess as a society and learn together. That's the answer. I don't think we're letting anyone down. I think we're learning together at the speed of life. Like, we're just experiencing it together, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Very good and concise answer to that. Okay, so another question that we got was, I think that we'll let Kishma hit this question. It says, hello, ladies. So I would like to know, how do you communicate without being overwhelmed with emotion to try to get a valid point across?
Okay. Having emotion is not a problem, right? So I think when you take the emotion out of it, sometimes you lose, the message. So if something is really stirring something up in you, and as you're speaking about it, you want to cry, like, it's okay to shed a tear, right? I think we have these social constructs, like we can't show emotion here, and we can't be angry here, and we can't do this. Now when it comes to something like anger, I say that's a little difficult one, right? Because there's different ways to express like your anger without being like disrespectful, right? So I think like when you're communicating, if it's leaning toward disrespect, if it's leaning toward someone not being able to hear you because you're yelling and screaming or using profanity, then there's no point in having the conversation, right? But if it's something like you're just a little heated about and you have a little bit of anger, I don't think that really is a problem. Some people may disagree, but I don't think that having emotion is really a problem. But sometimes you have to, before you have a conversation, you get some ideas of what you would like to say, but you have to realize that as you're speaking, someone is processing what you're saying, and they're gonna have a response, and they're gonna sometimes want to interject right at that point that you really want to make your point because they have a point, right? So it's a two-way street, right? So you have to kind of it's hard to do sometimes, but like hold your point in your head. You know what I mean? So expressing emotion, I don't think is really the issue. It's more like how, like I try to teach my clients, like I have a lot of teens, even adults. I have adult clients too who are like, I'm annoyed, I'm angry. And I tell them, I said, people probably tell you, anger and annoyance is wrong, but it's your feeling. It's not wrong. I mean, even the Bible says like, be angry and sin not, right? So there's nothing wrong. We have to stop telling people that their emotion is wrong. Being angry is not wrong. I always tell my kids, it's what you do with it. It's how you how do you express it? That's the key. It's not the feeling, it's what you do with it, right? So if you're coming to someone and you're just really heated, maybe that's not the time to talk to them, right? You need a little time to simmer down a little bit. You still have those feelings. The anger doesn't just go away, but you're not in that heated, like, I have to address this now. And then you're just saying all kind of things that's not appropriate. So having, the emotion behind something, that is not the problem. It's how you express it. So sometimes taking a little break, talking to someone, who may be a little bit older, maybe a little bit more experienced in it. And he doesn't have to be older, but someone who has a little bit of wisdom, who you can say, like, I'm dealing with this situation. This is what I want to say. And I just don't really know how to say it because this is how I want to say it. I have to check myself. Sometimes I have to check myself, okay? And how I say things and when I say things. Sometimes timing is appropriate. Maybe saying to someone, I really need to speak to you about something that's important. Can we schedule time to talk about it? I had to do that the other day with my supervisor twice. I had to send her an email and say, such and such, we experienced a little incident the other day. I would like time for us to sit down, right? So scheduling time, kind of processing what you want to say and realizing that you're probably not going to get to say everything you want to say, right? And then coming to a point where you have to say, like, okay, we've talked about a lot. Let's kind of like table this, right? Every discussion, even argument, does not always get settled right when it happens. So just being aware of that, all these expectations. If I say this, they're gonna do this, and So I think those are some important little steps, little keys that we can do when trying to express how we feel, even if we have a strong emotion behind it.
Wow, I'm so grateful for that answer. I'm just looking at these responses, guys. You can just keep pouring them in as they're coming to you in this discussion. This is meant to be a benefit to you. I come with preset questions, but I want to make sure that you guys get what you intend to get from this. With these professionals that I've sat down with, it's not all the time that you get to have a free talk with a therapist, free talk with a principal, free talk with a super genius. She's into just about everything, Pat McKenzie. She is an activist. She's also a life coach for women, and specifically young women. She is a mom, and she's been doing single momming for a while now. So she knows exactly how that feels too, if any of you are single moms. And she's just kind of found her way to navigate through a lot of things. Definitely an overcomer with a ton of things. So she's super valuable to this discussion. So yes, if you intend it for someone, please put their name. If not, if it's general, then I'll just select someone to answer it. We'll try to keep them concise because I know that time is kind of going to slip away from us, but I want you guys to benefit something here. So someone said in the YouTube section, and thank you so much for posting it, it says, if a person is born in America, why does he or she call him or herself African American instead of saying I am American? Well, are any of you African American?
I'm literally African and an American citizen. I'm literally African American, but I don't identify as African American. I identify as Zimbabwean American, which is
right, because Africa is a continent. It took me some time to actually learn that. So, to be honest, when you ask people what country are you from, if they say Zimbabwe, like they're answering your question. So you didn't ask what continent are they from.
I'm sorry, from my research, what I've noticed or what I've seen, and even with speaking with some of my friends and such, who go by African American, having a child who is half African American, I mean, part of it comes from the fact that when slaves are now considered free, their white counterparts weren't just going to call them now Americans. Right. No. And also they wanted to feel a sense of pride too. And I can understand that because I'm very proud about being Jamaican. I love to shout that from the rooftop all the time. I've never met a Jamaican person who doesn't like to say that they're Jamaican. So it also came down to, being able to put a source of pride on who they are, especially since heritage was cut off. So I can't fully answer that, but from my understanding, it gives them it gives a sense of worth and value to who you are. And at the end of the day, though, we are still all Americans. We have an American citizenship. You can get an American passport. You're an American.
Yeah. And I think that there's so much to this, because a lot of times these are designations that were given to us. I don't think anybody doesn't want to identify as American, just as European Americans, Russian Americans get to identify as American. I think we do, a part of the fight is to be identified as an American. And for the first thing you see about me, not to be, or the first thing you get to know about me is not just, oh, she's a Black girl that is well spoken, or she's a Black girl that's a principal. Oh, she's a Black woman that's phenomenal. She's a therapist. You know, I think that what we want to be identified as is as American. However, as Pat was stating, given the fact that this is what was given to us, hey, you're forever this, although we don't even have a clue what part of Africa we're from, which is another conversation of pain for a lot of people in the Black community who are, I'm sorry, in the African-American community, is not knowing truly where your roots trace from. We can only identify with the continent as a whole, truly. And there's a limited picture, but so that is a sense of ownership to say, I don't know from where, but somehow, some way, I know that I'm connected to this continent and they're connected to me. I wish for the day we can just say, I'm American, but I don't think right now we feel very American. And I think that also what more people of color are referring to is Black, if they are, you know, because we do come from various backgrounds, and I think that the commonality is being Black in America. Like, you know, I have a mixed bag heritage. My mom does specifically. My dad is African American, and so, you know, like Pat was saying, her daughter is Jamaican. She's also African American. And in the Jamaican side, there's Scottish and there's a whole lot of things there. So, you know, Black does the unifying thing. I think, but I think to be politically correct, people say African American. So let's go on ahead and look at, guys, your questions are going to get answered. Just stay with us. We will shorten our answers, okay? We'll shorten our answers to get to all of you, because I'm sure a lot more is going to come. I'm going to start with Pat on the following question. I have a question for you specifically as it pertains to COVID. However, I think that what seems to have drawn most people here has to do with the social justice, racism, and the mental health topic. So I'm not going to be very popular on this occasion, me in healthcare. If you guys have any healthcare questions for me, I can answer them. But you guys seem to be more here for the other stuff. So let me give you what you're here for. Okay, Pat, what advice do you have for parents, especially single parents, who are struggling to manage their children during this crisis with both the COVID thing and also the social justice injustices? Like, how does a person deal with that with their kids?
Wow. It's a weighted question, honestly. One, for myself personally, I try to give myself grace. Every single morning, every single day, I just try to give myself grace. There are times where I have to go to the grocery store, or there's a particular item. My daughter has allergies. I have food intolerances. So there are certain things we can't necessarily order offline and have shipped to the house. So I know I have to go to the grocery store. I now have to mask her up and take her with me. And I feel so guilty about it because it's just me. I can't leave her. She's not old enough to be left. So I have to just breathe and give myself grace in that instance. And it's also difficult because she sees everything that's going on. I listen to a lot of NPR, so she hears news playing in the background and such. So she has an idea too of what's going on, probably more than, because I don't hide from her, you know, the things that of this world. And I don't believe in doing that, just me personally, so that she can really go through the emotional aspect and not just live in a bubble. But I have to talk through with her, you know, we're going to the grocery store for X, Y, and Z. We come up with a system and a plan, you know, make sure that the mask stays on, the hands are clasped together like this. You know, if you see somebody getting too close, we have a little thing where I tell them to go through the mask so that I know that we need to turn around. Yeah. So that I know we need to turn around or get out of that aisle or something. And I try to make it as quick as possible. And when we leave out of the store, you know, we have our hand sanitizer. I make sure that, you know, I ask her how she's doing. I check in with her as much as possible to just make sure that, you know, she's not just out here kind of coasting along, but she's actually expressing the emotion. And there are days where, you know, especially this year, I've given a whole lot more grace, where if she has a moment where she breaks down or she's crying over something, maybe magically the iPad doesn't work or something, and that's a source of tears, I give grace for that with her too, because it's like, look, I get it. Yeah, it's not really the iPad that you're crying over. It's the fact that you can't go outside and play with your friends like you used to be able to, or we can't go and travel and spend time with, you know, your cousin like we're normally able to. So we're gonna sit here right now and we're gonna work through it. We're gonna cry if we need to. You're gonna be angry if you want to, whatever the case might be. And I also just try to find things that make her happy and comfortable. And again, try to focus on those things. I know that there are other parents who are single parents to multiple kids, and, you know, that's also probably brings its own challenge. I'm thankful that for me, it's just the one. So it's hard in itself because, of course, you know, I have to be her best friend too. But at the end of the day, I think that really just that grace period is just, it's necessary for both me and it's necessary for her. And also talking about our emotions.
Kishma, and just a yes or no response. Do you think that Pat is dealing with this in a good way with her daughter?
Yeah, talking, right? So, you know how Vimbo said, you know, we do better when, you know, once we know better, we do better. So communication, we talked about it a little bit. It's essential in any relationship. And parents, you have a relationship with your kids. Yes, you are the parent and they're the child, but you still have a relationship. It's still a relationship. So it needs communication so that they know like what's going on, what they can't do. And sometimes why, you know how like when we were older, like I'm a Caribbean American, and I know there was time when like parents were saying something like, because I said so. And there's a place for that sometimes, right? But in 2020, we got to do things a little different. And these kids they're feeding for information. They're getting all this information in school. So we're as parents or aunties and uncles just saying, because I said so. It's like, yeah, but it's, you know, in school, they tell me that I have to write out the whole problem, right? A math, they can't just give the answer. You gotta show the work. So you just saying like, cause I said so, like, where's the work? Well, why, Dad? Why, you know, like, why is this and what, you know? So just keeping the communication open, telling them like why we're doing stuff, right? You know, it's COVID, and so that they can understand. These kids are bright. I mean, girls that can use, I mean, they can use technology probably better than some of us, right? So having the communication, I think what you're doing is really good. Just having those conversations. And when you don't know something, like you can go on the internet, you can call somebody. Do you know somebody who knows somebody who knows, you know, just kind of keeping those lines of connected, you know, resources open. I think that that's essential.
Okay, cool. Next question is, Vimbo, for you. How do you feel about schools reopening? You've been forced in some ways to reopen. Are you making contingency plans for yourself and your students if you have to go back?
Yeah, I guess without getting into details, a lot of school, I'm just going to speak in generalities, so I'm not too specific to our situation. A lot of school administrators like myself or superintendents are being put in a very uncomfortable situation because right now, a lot of the money attached to reopening, some of you may be familiar with this big CARES Act from the government, and it's providing money, specifies reopening in person. So I think I really like the word you just used, Pat, grace. I think everybody needs grace. I think there are parents who are ready to rip their hair out because they've been with their kids at home since March and they have never spent
Yeah.
much quality time with their school age kids. And now they're seeing what their wonderful teachers have been telling them about. Little Johnny, who doesn't pay attention all day, is now not paying attention at home. So you know your teacher wasn't lying. I'm just kidding. We love our kids, but I do know, and I know just one of my best friends, she's like, I love my kids. It's just, I've got 3 of them and they're at 3 different grades and they're doing math I haven't done in years. And I'm like, why is this Common Core math? Like, you know, so I understand from the parents' perspective because our nation seems to be moving toward reopening in a very general sense. And that means people have to go back to work or they have to find a babysitter. And on the other side, I mean, I want to ask some of these politicians, like, would you be paid $40,000 a year to risk your life? Some schools don't have mental health counselors. So what do we do with kids who are coming back and have experienced trauma and now have developed depression and now have anxiety? Or some schools, smaller schools, don't even have school nurses. So what do you do? Because you're a nurse. What do you do? Who's checking the temperatures? Who is paying for the sick days? Most schools I know allow about 10 to 15 sick days a year. So that means you can only get COVID once and you can only get it on a Friday afternoon. And, and you have to test positive within 10 physical. So what I would say is if you are a parent, if you are a teacher, if you're an administrator, give yourself grace as these plans are happening. I know I am so blessed to be under leadership that just allows us I'm in a system where each school is allowed to do what's good for us because we have smaller class sizes. And so we're dialoguing with our parents. And then we're also, I'll say this even though we're live, we're stalling, okay? We are in one of those states that's trying to open early, but some other states open after Labor Day. We're like, listen, with the information we have right now, we cannot safely reopen in 2 or 3 weeks. So give us some more time to make that safe decision because whether we're a small class size or a big class size, I can't control Johnny's grandmother or Johnny's mom who went on vacation to wherever last week and now came back with COVID. So I would just say everyone involved in this situation, give people grace. I wear a mask. I also have compassion and grace for people who feel very strongly against wearing it. I feel like it's my duty to wear one because I feel like it keeps my neighbors safe. And yet at the same time, I think in this season of my life, I'm learning to listen. We have to listen to people. And then we also have to listen to the scientists and the epidemiologists because they went to school for this. So let's stop pretending. Okay, I'm done. I'm gonna drink my water. I'm done. I'm off my soapbox. I'm
a lot of people have no questions for me, but taking care of, screening people for COVID-19 all day, every day, many hours a day. I'm going to tell you, please listen. This is not a political point. Again, we've politicized being Black. We've politicized now wearing a mask. Listen, it is just a tool. I get it. It is just a tool. I have listened and I understand and I have looked at copious amounts of literature. I'm going to just tell you, it is just a tool. Obviously, social distancing works the best, but 6 feet, 12 feet, that's great. Add a face mask, that's great. Every little thing we can do makes a difference. Avoiding crowds when you're sick, avoiding crowds when you think you have allergies, these are things that do help. They are tools. So no, the end all be all is not, just having a mask on, but it does help to protect other people and it helps to protect you. I have had this conversation amongst family nurse practitioners and medical doctors and physician assistants. So much we've talked and bantered back and forth, and I have said, why is the media telling people that and I don't want to do misinformation because I don't want YouTube to ban this. So please, YouTube, this is not misinformation. Please, please, please. When you get this, please understand that I have looked at the literature and I understand, having worked in the hospital, how this goes. So please look at the literature before you ban this. But just want to give that little disclaimer here. The literature does support that those masks do have a measure of protection for the wearer as well. When I work in the hospital, when we go into the room of somebody who has tuberculosis, when we wear the N95 masks, it is for our protection. Okay, that other person doesn't need to protect themselves necessarily from something, and we are wearing it for our protection. And we do not walk out with TB. We do get tested for TB often, but usually it is negative. It is going to be negative because we wear our protective, it's called personal protective equipment. It wouldn't be called PPE if you couldn't get protection from it. So when people say, oh, you're just protecting others, at first, remember, they didn't want you to wear a mask. They were saying, no, just leave it to the healthcare workers. Well, if it doesn't help the healthcare workers, then why do they have to wear it?
Right.
It does offer some measure of protection to the wearer and to the person who is obviously not, who needs the other person to wear it. So, yeah.
Can I make an appeal too? I just wanted to throw this in there for any parents who are watching, because we love you. And this is just my appeal across the board in light of what she said about the masks. I do feel like people are very passionate about going back in person. And I have been very disheartened lately to see some posts of, like, I heard of a parent trying to sue a school district for having people wear masks. And I just think of most of my friends are teachers or educators, and I know so many of them with pre-existing health conditions, and they're just terrified for their life. Like, I don't think anyone signed up for this when we were in college to, like, risk our lives to teach the children we love. So I would just appeal to people to have grace during the season, because there's just so much that goes into someone deciding to risk their life to teach your child. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, just another little tidbit. No one's ever died wearing a mask. So I can understand it. It does feel weird. People are like, I'm breathing back in my own CO2. And this is true. It is highly a potential that if you have a respiratory condition that you can feel like you can't breathe. I would just say, do yourself a favor and get a mask that is a little more breathable. It may have to be the non-medical masks, because cloth mask does bother some people. I get it. But just find what works for you, just to offer a little bit of shield and protection. I can truly understand if you feel like you cannot breathe, but we haven't seen someone die from wearing a mask. So now let's look at some other questions here.
Isabella, can I just say one thing? And this is something that can be generalized to a lot of things. When I was in a psychology course, one of my professors said, if you don't get anything from this class, I want you to get this: be a critical reader. And I point that out to say there's a lot of information, but we have to be critical readers, and we have to read with understanding. There's a lot of information out there. So whether you're a supporter of masks or not, read, and we need to make informed decisions, right? Yes. So a lot of times we make decisions based on, like, our thoughts, our feelings. We need to make informed, intelligent decisions. So if one group says don't wear, read why they're saying it. If one group says yes, wear, read why they're saying it, and pray for the Holy Spirit. I mean, some people are not connected to God, and I know that, but pray for the Holy Spirit that God will give you the knowledge, the understanding to say, like, you know what, based on the information, I'm making a formed, I've read critically, because we can read things and I read things on Facebook and I was like, oh no, they didn't say that. My emotions start going, right? So we're human. So let's try to make informed, critical minded, Holy Spirit driven, hopefully, decisions when we're deciding about anything in life. This is not just about masks, right? Who are you gonna be with? What job are you gonna take? What state you're gonna move to? What house you're gonna buy?
Yes.
That's a little.
Ooh, we're getting questions, guys. So we're gonna just, like, consolidate all of our answers. And this is me too, guys, because I could get passionate about all these topics. Okay. I know. Okay, so guys, and then I do have, like, my 3-year-old who will soon, or later want to join the live.
Yeah, she will.
Yeah, so we're going to progress you guys forward. Okay, so let's try to give 2-minute or less answers to these questions, because we want to get everybody's questions answered. And I've kind of...
You'll have to do, like, a symbol or something, because otherwise I don't know what 2 minutes is.
I know, right? Like, 2 minutes. No. Okay. The next question I have, Kishma, anonymous attendee says, is there different types of depression? And if so, what are some ways to help a person out of depression?
Okay, so there are different types of depression. So we have like dysthymia, which is like a low grade depression, and you know all of the different depressions have certain criteria. So like dysthymia is something like you have to have low grade depression for like 2 years, and it has to be 2 weeks out of it. You know, all these different criteria. So there are criteria for each particular diagnosis. So there's something like dysthymia. There's major depression. You have bipolar disorder, which is depression and mania combined. So there are different types of depression. So really kind of figuring out for the person, it will be helpful for them to kind of track what their depression looks like, so that if they decide to meet with like a mental health practitioner, they can say like, you know, well, I've been depressed for 2 weeks and this is what it looked like. I had hopelessness, I had tearfulness, because depression looks different for different people. It's not just feelings of sadness, right? Some people are very irritable and angry and frustrated. Some people are isolative. Some people participate in more risky behavior. So it's not a catch-all that everybody who's depressed presents this way. It's a lot about personality, experience, environmental factors, you know, social relationships. And in terms of kind of like helping someone out of depression, grace and patience. I really like that Pat mentioned grace. So grace and patience with people. It is not something, especially when someone is clinically depressed, for someone to just jump out of it, right? You have this, you have that, you have that. Why are you depressed, right? Asking the question in that way, you can say like, what are some of the things that make you depressed? But not like, why are you depressed, right? So asking questions that are more therapeutic in nature, providing support, letting the person know like, hey, you don't have to talk about it now, but I'm here. Just sometimes just letting people know that they're here, right? There are crisis lines that people can call. So there's like suicide prevention lines, and you can Google things like that in your area, whatever state you're in, whatever local community. Use your resources. I know that the internet has a lot of crazy stuff on it, but again, being a critical reader, you know, finding certain things, doing your research. So being supportive, asking those questions. You see someone isolating, kind of checking in on people a little bit more, right? And sometimes people do have to seek professional help. Oftentimes, especially now in 2020, maybe like 10, 15 years ago, it was easier for people to bounce back, but there's so much more going on in our world that are affecting people. You know, people are losing jobs, relationships. So it's not as easy for us to just bounce back. So just being supportive, seeking professional help. Sometimes people, you know, use medication to help. You know, that's another thing. People are yay medication, nay medication. I have my own personal opinion about medication, but you know, sometimes that medication, it can help. But that, I don't think that should be the first line of defense. I think, you know, as a therapist, I promote therapy, right? I promote that interaction. But sometimes people really need interventions outside, you know, pharmaceutical interventions, you know, psychopharmacology, that in addition to therapy. So support, reaching out. I'm hoping, you know, churches, schools, like, you know, sometimes a school has a counselor, or they can refer you somewhere, and just looking up things in your area will be helpful.
All right. So, and I would just want to add just a little to that, just to say that if you are suffering from depression, please don't just sit there and say, I can deal with this inside of me. Because to be honest with you, that problem just mounts and mounts and mounts. And either you will perpetuate cycles in your, you know, because sometimes it's in the family. You'll perpetuate cycles, and your children will see it, or your family will see it. And sometimes people will wonder what's going on with you, and you may not know that other people can sense that something's wrong with you. So please, if you do have that experience, don't be afraid to reach out to a therapist, because they're all just there standing by. It's not that expensive, and it's definitely going to be worth it to invest in yourself right now. With this pandemic, it's a perfect time, and don't be ashamed of it. Don't be stereotyped by it. Hey, wear that proudly that you see a therapist. I think we've normalized that now in this culture. It's okay. The next question is, I'll go Pat. What is your abbreviated guidance on helping out with children who are overwhelmed at this time with what's going on, and they're spending a lot of time on social media viewing content that is likely to stimulate more anger and resentment?
That is a really good question. One, I try to give a structure to the day. It's a loose kind of structure. It's like, okay, you wake up, you make sure that you make your bed, brush your teeth, wash your face, do your devotions. There has to be some type of reading throughout the day. I'm really, really lenient for the most part. I only make it like 30 minutes. As long as you don't come and bother me too much while I am working, you know, you can do the occasional hi, how are you doing, whatever. But having that structure, that's going to be important for some children. There are, for me personally, I've banned without me being around, you can't be on social media. So my daughter's 9. She can't be on social media without me being present. I try and vet the games that she does play. I don't care if it's multi-user games where you could speak to other children, as long as it's children that she knows. But I give grace where it's like, I understand that this is going to be something that you're going to have fun with. I want you to have fun. I don't right now mind too much that a lot of her time is spent on the computer, because I know that we still do our walks. I know that she still reads every single day. So as long as you're doing something else productive, then that can be an offset to it. But for older kids, maybe those who are in their teens and such, I know that it can be a lot harder to try and talk to them, you know, especially as your parent, but maybe trying to find somebody else within the family who they do feel comfortable with. For me and Bellamy, because she's my sister-in-law, we've established that, you know, it's very important for the kids to feel safe with the opposite one. In case my daughter doesn't feel comfortable speaking with me about something, she can go and speak to her aunt about it. Her aunt can tell her, you know, X, Y, and Z in my absence, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And the reverse will be fine with her and her daughter when she gets a little older too. So, you know, at least trying to bring out of them. And sometimes even teens, they want to express themselves in a way. And it goes back to being able to listen, comprehend what they're saying, and not just shut down. It's like, get off of social media. Don't do that. Don't do this. But actually taking the time to sit and like, okay, so check in with the feelings, or if they're not going to talk about the feelings, what is it that you're doing? Why are you doing this? Let's watch a movie now, something. So we're still keeping that connection together.
Definitely, this is a great time to build on that connection for sure. So that's great. Next question
as well.
Go on.
Offer them alternatives. When you tell people don't do, give them an alternative of what they can do.
That's true.
Yeah.
You can't just say don't do, because it's like, okay, I'm just going to sit here, give them an alternative. Be prepared for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're power blazing through. Michelle says, Principal Vimbo, what plans are in place now or will be in place to help students get back some sense of normalcy when school begins? What are educators doing?
Well, I know, I don't know of a single educator who isn't looking into mental health resources for their students right now. It was already, praise God, a movement happening within the education community of focusing on the social and emotional, I think it's SEL, social emotional learning component of education, and not just focusing on math and reading and writing, but also focusing on the child developing as a human being. I will say, as I mentioned before, I think the struggle right now is a bit of that funding is tied up in whether or not schools open face to face. And so I do think some schools are in a very difficult situation. And I think how some people are kind of bypassing that is teachers are just engaging in professional development. I myself, I've started to listen to certain podcasts about different things so that I'm not just surprised. And then I think also, I'm not sure who mentioned it, maybe Pat, but even as, or maybe you mentioned it, Bella, as an adult or as a community, destigmatizing therapy, things like therapy or talking to mental health counselors, letting students know like it's okay to feel overwhelmed, and modeling that vulnerability to a point. There is a professional line. I don't sit there and tell my kids about my medical or therapy record or whatever, but to a point, allowing students to know that like this is a difficult time for the world. Like we are all going through this collective trauma. Whether you're white or Black, you are experiencing COVID. And then if you're a Black student, you are experiencing that, in addition to people responding differently to what's happening with social justice right now. So yes, I would say teachers, if you're a teacher watching this, engage in professional development. Don't wait for your district to provide it. YouTube is free. Podcasts are free. I personally love audiobooks because I like walking and listening to my books. So I listen to a lot on Audible, just making yourself aware. And then if you are an administrator, I have personally been looking into some grants, because I'm like, listen, if the government is not going to have my back and we have to start online, maybe if God wills that, then we got to find some money somewhere. And praise God that there are funds available, because people do value providing mental health services to students, to schools that don't have it as regularly, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so important. You guys are the definition of a true frontline worker. Just think about it, because you're in the front. I mean, I don't really know who's not really experienced. I mean, I guess there are some people that don't have to experience this, but all of us have to, Pat, you are in digital marketing, and is one of your jobs, one of your many, okay? You have so many. But you have to think about going back into that environment, and then where does your child go? Kishma, you being, in your line of work right now, with still having questions yourself, you are facing a lot. And then you as a principal, Vimbo, my goodness, you are probably going to have much more than we are, because you got to deal with kids' emotions, the adults' emotions, because they have to work. And so you've got so many people's emotions to deal with that you better have like a long list of people to be able to direct, because you're going to be doing a lot of referrals to Kishmas in the world.
Right. We need you, Kishmas. Please stay by our side. I was gonna add this, and this is what gives me hope, because this spring, we're a smaller school, so I also teach math for middle school. And so this spring, something that really gave me hope was just, it is a difficult time. I do think kids need to see mental health counselors. I think all of them need to be screened. Coming back this fall, everybody needs to be screened for that. I stand by that. I'm working so that that can be possible in some degree. But I do know I was Googling on my own. I'm a little educator. I'm not a counselor, but I was like, what can I do to help my kids? And every day we would get on our video call, and I would just ask them, finish this sentence. I am wondering about, or I am happy about, or every day it was a little different prompt. Guys, I am not a counselor. They still have a lot of support they need. But I will tell you, we had so many insightful conversations from our 8th graders who were like, I'm wondering about if I'm even going to have a high school experience next year, because my school only goes up to 8th grade. I'm wondering about, is my family going to be okay? I'm wondering if my dad's going to lose kids are vulnerable to the point where sometimes I'm turning off my video because I'm wiping away my tears, like, oh, my babies. I pray for them every day. But yeah, if you ask kids, they are capable of sharing. It's we as adults who need to be ready to support them, is what I'll put out there.
Those are wonderful questions, honestly. I'm going to incorporate those into my regular.
I'll send you my Google list.
Okay.
In the interest of time, I'm going to now have you start paying attention to just 1 minute or less answers, because we do have some more, and I don't want anyone to feel left out here. So now we have to really put oh, by the way, Michelle said she loved that response. Thank you so much for that feedback. So let's go on. It says for Bella, what are some simple steps other than soap, water, and mask parents can do to help their kids to fight against COVID? Simple answer to that is that there's very little with children that is super effective, because children are the most amazing little vectors of disease ever. They are, it was like, oh my God. No, but seriously, children they just touch everything, and that's why they get a lot of infection. But to be honest with you, it's probably good that their immune system is challenged at a young age, because you don't want to necessarily wait till you're older. You might experience it a lot worse. So children naturally touch, they're curious, they want to go. They'll touch their face if you say don't touch your face. The mask is good and the mask is bad, because they'll touch their face more with the mask because it feels weird and they've never ever used it before. But I think that just, making sure that you have some, and I think this goes into somebody's YouTube question as well. Someone asked about what they can do to amp up their immune system to prevent infection. I just want to say, make sure you have everything that you've been using to prevent infection naturally, whatever you're doing at home, drinking lots of water, making sure you're getting sunshine, vitamin D, making sure you have an excellent multivitamin that is bioavailable. Usually that's going to be something that can break down easily in the body. So I'm not talking tablets, I'm talking capsules, I'm talking powders, I'm talking liquids, things like that. If you can get those in, kind of reduce your sugar intake. I know that we all have a sweet tooth somewhere, except for my daughter, she has it nowhere. But make sure that you're thinking about that. It's a holistic thing. Make sure you're getting enough rest. You're reducing your stress. Stress has been known to decrease your immune system. So these are some things that you're going to have to play a little home pharmacy for a bit. And most importantly, keep taking your kids' temperature. That has been, some were saying before, 99% effective. It has reduced to about 75 to 80% effective in and thinking about if there's an infection, temperature is above 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. So to think about that, teach your kids about social distancing, show them what 6 feet looks like, show them, some of those things. And to be honest with you, children have fared better with this than others. I think that Pat has a different experience. Her daughter was in a very, very critical situation when she had COVID. So please understand that this is not surefire. We're still learning a lot about it, but children typically fare better than adults. As we age, our body is breaking down. So, we're getting to a new phase. So you have to maintenance yourself different. And if you do have a headache, don't just write it off as just a headache, especially if you've been in crowds. If you do have something like allergies, don't just write it off as allergies if you've been in a crowd. For what I'm going to say is, if the symptoms have been going on for greater than 10 to 14 days, then typically, it may just be something that's there. It may just be allergies. If it's brand new, then I want you to watch that, especially keep your temperature, okay? So that's for those questions. And as far as your children, let them watch as much YouTube videos as possible on this healthy stuff. Look, like Principal Vimbo is saying, if you can, find something that you vet and then let them watch it in terms of how to keep their hands off their face, how to wash their hands, how to social distance, because sometimes seeing it visually is going to be very helpful. Telling them that at this time we have to reduce your friendship closeness, and that sucks. It's hard to do, but I have to, because I love you and I want to have you here, and I know you want me here, and you might be okay with it. It might just be nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea for you, but it could be a death sentence for me. So we're in this together. We're working together. So next, let's see. I hope that was good for you.
I can hear you.
Bella, I was going to say, I don't know why it suddenly went quiet.
It went out.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Now,
now we do now.
Okay.
What was the question?
Somebody said, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody said that you ladies are awesome and amazing for helping people with this panel. And God bless you all. Hi, Kishma, love you. So that's awesome. So the next one is question for, someone says, is there a link between depression, diet, and lifestyle? Absolutely, there is a link there. I think we can all attest to that. There's a major link between those. So, for your depression, yes, sometimes it can be cared for naturally. I think Kishma touched on that. There are times where when it's gone way beyond what's normal and you're not being productive anymore, and nothing you've tried has helped, even therapy, because I want you to try therapy. Let's normalize therapy. then I would definitely look into speaking to a psychiatrist, because sometimes you have to get a little bit of meds on board just to balance out a little bit. And then you can go to therapy or something and get it from there. So yeah, there's a link. Oh, another one for me. I didn't know you guys wanted some answers. Given the fact that COVID can spread by air conditioning, should children go back to churches or schools even if they reopen at this time? The jury is still out on exactly whether or not this is droplet or if this is spread by aerosol. But I'm going to tell you this, the current data is supporting aerosol. So we're thinking tuberculosis type aerosol. So can it be spread through air conditionings? I'm not sure. I have not looked into the literature on that. But what I will say is that I think your biggest threat isn't necessarily the air conditioning, although I think you're going at recirculated air, sort of like in an airplane, the kids are in a room. The most important thing is going to be person-to-person transmission. That means the two people are close for a period of time that allows for there to be adequate, transfer of virus to that other person, and it gets through their nose, their mouth. Some are saying the eyes even. So it has to be enough time in that close contact. I deal with a lot of those close contact situations to assess whether or not a person has been, exposed and they should be worried about it. So I wouldn't worry so much about the air conditioning as I would just making sure of what the school's practices are. What are they doing with your kids during the day? Is your kid practicing social distancing? Is your kid making sure they don't touch their face? It's going to be awkward going back to school. But what I'm going to say is that, okay, should they be open? Probably not right now. It's kind of premature. And I think that it's moreover going to have an impact on us than it will the children, because our children bring stuff back to us. But we are trying to do the best that we can, I think, in terms of making sure that children stay safe and also receive an education. But I think it's too soon. Yes. Do I think we need some more creativity to keep them home for a while? Yes. Should churches be open? Possibly not. Not if your church members are not educated and are unwilling to comply with what has been said. There needs to be education. Your church should not open. If your church is open, but you guys have not had education, you need to be sounding an alarm to the pastor. Hey, pastor, I went to this, this seminar and we kind of talked to a bunch of professionals, and what kind of research have you done and what do you have available? If any of you do have like a church that you attend and you need your pastor to have some materials, just feel free to let me know, and I'll try to get you my email address, or I'll try to get your email address, or drop your email address. I think only us as panelists are able to see your questions live. If you drop it, or even drop it, some people can inbox me on the YouTube. I need to figure that out. But drop your email address and I'll send you the materials, because we did produce some materials for ours. So that was that question. Kishma. Okay, I think we're wrapping up because I'm not getting a lot more questions. But hey, ladies, just wanted to ask, is it okay to have boundaries with family members or even people that you love without making them feel like you don't care about them at this time?
Had this question. I talked about this with a family member today. There is nothing wrong with establishing boundaries. Actually, it's important. In every relationship, there's boundaries. So when you go to work and you have your supervisor, there's a boundary that you don't cross. There's a boundary with friendships, right? Colleagues, people you meet in the store. So there's nothing wrong with establishing boundaries, especially when you're involved in a relationship with someone where maybe you feel, the relationship is difficult. You don't feel like it's equal, right? You don't feel respected. So establishing boundaries is essential to having better relationships, right? And boundaries just means basically like, these are the things I desire, kind of expect from you, right? So sometimes expectations, you could be a little bit tricky with that, because we do have expectations of people. Sometimes they just cannot meet. But there's some essential things that I, as a person, want. I want to be able to trust you. I want to be able to confide in you, right? So that's setting a boundary. That's letting people know this is what I desire. This is what I need for us to have a healthy, relationship. And setting boundaries are also beneficial for yourself. It's a way of practicing self-care. We have to learn how to practice good self-care and take care of our needs. We cannot take care of the needs of others if our life is just, kind of all praises. So, establishing sound boundaries, being clear. Sometimes people may need an explanation why you're setting a particular boundary. That's okay. So I definitely think boundaries are really they're essential in any relationship.
And I'll add to what she said. I think just in light of the conversation about whether it's COVID or the talks about social justice, with COVID, recently I've been having conversations with my friends because I have a spectrum in my friend group. I think probably all of the people in my friend group where I live are willing to wear masks, but it's varying degrees and it's varying. I mean, there's people who you can just obviously tell have less at stake or are less concerned about the ramifications or are saying, oh, we're young, like even if we get it, we'll bounce back. And so there's a little bit more relaxed of a approach there versus friends who have very serious stakes or recognize how serious it could be if they or their spouse got it. And so I think having those conversations about, I want to hang out with you. I have a friend who's very good and she's very clear about saying, if we hang out, we're both going to wear masks. We're going to socially distance. We went to the beach when it was open, but it's not open any longer. So we went together, but we were both like the only people on the beach with masks. We sat way far away from everyone else. We walked way past everyone. We were sitting 6 feet apart on our little things. That was weeks ago because now the situation has changed. But yeah, any friend group, or I've encountered even myself being comfortable saying, hey, if I hang out with you, we need to wear masks. Similarly with the race discussion, like I said, just because we're Black doesn't mean we're all experiencing it the same way. And I actually had to reel myself in because one of my closest friends, the first day this was happening and the protests were happening at the end of May, I called her, I was upset. I wanted her to be angry. Then I called her a few days later and I said, I need to apologize to you because I'm assuming you experience racism the way I've experienced racism, and you've been rejected in the same ways I've been rejected because of my race, or you've missed opportunities. So I'm expecting something unreasonable from you. And if you don't want to talk about race, if that's not what you want to talk about right now, that's okay. Our friendship is worth more than just pushing what I'm passionate about. So I think that's kind of how that applies, at least for me personally, in these two situations with COVID and with social justice.
So I'm just gonna ask you to give a 30-second answer to this. For the people who are viewing who do not identify as Black, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to read? What would you want them to get out of something like this discussion? Because I think we've talked about, the pandemic a little more. We've talked about mental health a little bit more, and that's fine. You guys are here for that. But I also want to make sure that people can walk away and feel like they received adequate education if they are not Black. What is something you want them to know? Taking 1 minute at max. Okay, I expanded it from 30 seconds to 1 minute. 1 minute at max. What do you want them to know to take from this discussion? And action wise, what can they do? What should they know from you?
For me, I want you to believe what Black people say is their experience instead of trying to talk them down like, oh no, it can't possibly be that. Actually look at history past what your history is. And right now there's so many options in terms of stories, documentaries, books to read. Find them, read them online, listen to podcasts, and don't consume it from just white or Latino or consume it from the Black creators. And also buy Black. I mean, support the community that is right now the most disenfranchised. And do your own research. That's the main thing, is don't necessarily ask your Black friend to teach you. Instead, go off on your own and choose to learn, because there's so many resources out there on the internet right now from other content creators. So you can find it if you really want to.
Can I just, I'm going to go right after her with my 30 seconds / 45 seconds. Listen, Google, this is what my little sister says all the time. Google is too free. Google is too free for some of the questions some of us get. And I love it because I personally, my non-Black friends have been so gracious and just showered me with like, I love you text and I'm so sorry this is happening. Like I have a great community of people. I think that's just probably the only people I allow in my space is people who were on the same wavelength even before this happened. But I would say, yeah, watch 13th on Netflix. Like there are Black creators out here who are, or when they see us, I haven't seen it myself because I have to be in a certain mental space, but I've heard really good reviews just about it. I think what Black people are seeking is not necessarily, I mean, we want empathy, right? But for me as a Black person, when I'm appealing to other people who are in leadership, I want action. Like, you need to believe us. Yes, Pat, that is so much of my struggle right now is I'm still having conversations with people who are like, you don't experience racism because you sound white. And I'm like, what? Like, what is going on? Like, you present yourself in a certain way. I'm like, it's because I get my weave done. It's because I straighten my hair. It's because listen, we're going to be real. Like, it's because I do these things so society can swallow what I'm bringing, right? But believe Black people, and then in your position, realize and recognize, what am I doing that is suppressing Black people in my own actions? And how can I change my actions? That would be my appeal to people who are not Black watching this.
So I agree with, doing the research and the thing about empathy, I'm happy that you touched on that because I had to say in a meeting with my executive director and a VP, I don't need you to keep telling me thank you for coming forward and all that stuff. I need you to act, right? So action is important. And just to align with that, introspection, right? So a part of what Pat and Vimbo said, introspection, start checking with yourself. We cannot go out and I don't know how much I can drill this in and do all these great things if we inside are having all these thoughts and feelings. They don't just go away, but start doing the introspection. What have I done to keep this going? Right? What have I not done? What can I do? So having that internal look at yourself and then connecting with other people who are, like-minded or who can, point you in the right direction. So that empathy, that action, that research, just really kind of doing something about it. Do what you can do. We all can do something for someone. Doing what you could do, not what someone else can do, right? Someone else is marching, writing letters, banging on City Hall. That may not be your talent or your way. What can I do? And it starts with that self introspection. Where am I at? Where have I been? Where do I want to go? And,
So guys, I think that what we were taking from this is that number one, we want you to seek therapy if you need therapy right now. It is absolutely fine to get therapy right now. So if you need therapy, please get it. Please reach out. I think from Pat's perspective, as a parent right now, it's okay to say, I don't have all the answers. It's okay to be vulnerable with your children to a degree that they can understand it, that this is confusing for you too, but we're on a team together. I'm going to give you more grace as you spend more time on social media trying to figure out what you believe, who you are, where you're at, or just trying to decompress. But I'm also going to spend time with you, and I'm going to ask you to step away from that, and I'm going to ask you to reset so that you're not overwhelmed, so that you still, know at the end of the day, we will get through this. We're going to get through it together. I know it's rough, but you don't need to give up. We don't want you consuming negative content. We want things to be edifying to you. And I think Principal Vimbo, you did a great job articulating for us that, you guys who are working in education are doing everything you can right now. I don't think anybody wants children to be sick, but they're doing everything around the clock. I bet she's losing sleep as she thinks about school getting ready to start and protecting your child. If you feel like your child can't be there because your child has immune system issues, your child isn't going to comply with social distancing, or your child, your child gets sick a lot and you're just worried, maybe you do need to consider some alternate options. But I would say that before anything, if you have to go to work and you have nobody to care for your kid, question your school about what they're doing. And if you're not happy with that answer, if it's not satisfactory, seek somewhere else to place your child in care. And finally, for myself, I just want to say that, as far as your health, don't take your foot off of the pedal. Just because your churches are reopening, just because your schools are reopening, just because the US is reopening, we are getting to cold and flu season. And with that means that COVID is going to flourish because it flourishes in colder weather, but also because we won't know the difference necessarily off the bat. And with the desire of some to slow down testing, that is not going to be helpful either, because we need to test more to make sure of what a person has or does not have. Is the test surefire? No, it is not 100% sure that it's going to detect that you have COVID or not, but it is one of our greatest lines of protection right now to slow the spread. Someone asked about staying healthy and safe during this pandemic. I think that in terms of healthy, it's going to be hard. I'm sure you're going through emotions. It's okay if you've gained a couple pounds. Don't feel bad about that. I don't want nobody body shaming you, and I don't want you to body shame yourself, because you are beautiful however you look. However, set some goals for yourself. Say, hey, look, I don't want to lose control of myself because I may have an unhealthy pattern with eating during this time. We all have had something that has helped us to cope, but I'm asking that you will consider, just temperance and saying, okay, maybe I need to go stack up on a bunch of fruit because that's going to get me through when I have a sweet tooth, and eat a lot of fruit, and also get a friend who you can check in with, and you guys have a little competition. Just say, look, it's a totally friendly competition. I'm going to love you at the end of this, but I need a little bit of motivation to shed a couple of pounds because I've gained a couple. And hey, I'm not ashamed of how I look, but I want to be my healthiest and my strongest to go through this, because we do understand that anyone with a BMI that's greater than 30 that's an additional health risk. So if you have other comorbid conditions, then weight can add to, the picture and make it a little more difficult for you if you do get COVID. So please be mindful to take care of yourself. Bimbo?
Can I share like 15 seconds? I promise it'll be
Okay,
quick. But this just came to my mind and it's a little silly. So when COVID started and I started working from home, I immediately went and bought like 5 pairs of leggings, guys, because when you're Zoom calling, like nobody sees what pants you're wearing. And I did notice I was gaining weight. But I've had this conversation with my doctor in the past. It's more important. Yes, weight gain is okay. Yes, we don't want to just gain weight and gain weight and gain weight, because it doesn't make us feel great. Like our body is reacting to something. And when it's stressed, we hold on to that weight. I understand that. But my doctor has always emphasized that it's more important to be active and move. So for me, I have not weighed myself in several months. So I'm so happy. I haven't gained any weight. It's like those people who say, if you don't test, we don't know if you have corona, but that's bad. That's bad thinking. But anyway, with the weight, I haven't weighed myself because for me, my goal more so is, can I get a walk in every day? Can I jump on my little mini trampoline I have in my house every day? Can I even walk up and down the stairs in my little townhouse every day? If I've done that, then it matters less, because my body is just keeping me alive right now during a pandemic. And that's okay if I gain a few pounds in its stressed out mode. You know what I mean? So that was not 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
And we all have different body compositions. We're all made with different frames. So actually even BMI, especially for Blacks, BMI can be incorrect. So please understand that it needs to be what's healthy for you. What makes you feel the best. Get to where you feel the best and have somebody to be your partner in getting there. Okay, so I want to say a prayer for you guys before you get ready to go. I know some other people have departed. I'm so thankful to be able to speak to each one of these ladies. They are so talented, so smart, and so just everything. I wish we could talk forever, and you guys have been a great listeners, and I hope you've taken enough from this to be able to go back and be empowered to ask questions and make some decisions, important decisions over the next year. Let's pray. Dear God, I just thank you for the opportunity to visit with all of these people here. These are just a few issues out of many issues going on, and I'm sure more is going to come about as the year presses on. This is a tough year for many people. People have questions, but my biggest prayer is that you will have these people to hold on, help them to hold on and to be strong, and help them to know who they are in you. Help them to find their way and their path that makes the most sense at this time, and to give themselves grace, as Pat put it, grace to be able to just say, look, things look different, but I'm accepting that different for now. And I'm going to celebrate my victories, and I'm going to learn from the little things that may be weaknesses or things that I could do better. Lord, I pray a hedge of protection over all these people. They're beautiful people who have just come here to learn more, to protect themselves, to protect their family, to help educate others. And I pray that we've just touched that just a bit and we've driven them to more education. So Lord, bless everybody here. Thank you so much for just this beautiful group. And we ask that you'll be with us now as we, kind of return to our new normal for now. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for being a part of this. And go on ahead. And I would say if you're interested in more panel discussions, we're going to have shorter discussions, but different discussions with my husband, who's a pastor. He had one already. It's on youtube.com/New Perspectives 777. Mine is youtube.com/I am Bella TV, I think.
Yes.
It's on the flyer. But New Perspective 777 is where we're going to put more. You ladies want to say your handle or where people can find you?
Oh, we're
If
doing
you
that.
want to, if you have a burner account, I don't care.
I do. And this is exciting. I'm like getting into branding. Look at what COVID does to us. I'm at Principal Vimbo, both on Facebook. So it's just facebook.com/Principal Vimbo, or on Instagram. So at Principal Vimbo. I'm not giving my Twitter because Twitter is a little exciting, but those are the public ones.
Perfect. Other ladies?
I just have my own personal. I really need to get like a professional. I'm doing more of this. I'm like, I really need to get a professional kind of like page. So I think I'll work on that.
If you need to
I do use Instagram. I'm not as active on my main account, but it's at The Confident You on Instagram. And also you can find me on Facebook at Ruthann McKenzie. Okay, I know that I go by Pat, but I also go by my first name too. And I also wanted to point out, thank you so much, Bella, for being a gracious and wonderful host during this whole time.
Thank you.
Oh, now we can't hear you again.
Oh no, now we can't hear you, but we love you.
I'm sorry. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.